is episode number 209 of the ABAP podcast, and in this episode we will be celebrating Dry January like we've never done before. So in this episode we will be interviewing Dr. Joseph Fisher to talk about some of the effects that Dry January will have on our body and ways to really maximize our efforts in January. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the ABAP podcast. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Joe Fisher, who's a food scientist and creator of SOBAR. Dr. Joe Fisher, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So in the past, we've done a lot of interviews around Dry January. A lot of the time it's around mixologists, enthusiasts, or producers, spirit for you producers, talking about how to make the most of Dry January and enjoy some good drinks along the way. But today we're going to be talking to Dr. Joe Fisher about some of the benefits of Dry January and as well some education around your product, if I'm not mistaken, is also right.
Yes, called SOBAR.
Fantastic, great. So before we begin, I think it's really important to kind of have this awkward conversation we need to have. You know, people that listen to this podcast generally have, a couple of drinks a night. So I think I want to kind of lay the base layer down for consumption in general. So my first kind of elephant in the room question is there any benefit to actually drinking alcohol?
Well, the answer to that clearly is yes. Otherwise, I don't think it would have survived the last few thousand years. But I have to break it down into different categories. So there's a psychic benefit to it. There's a social benefit to it. I think that's pretty well established. And if you ask most people, that's probably where they see most of the benefit. In terms of health benefits, there's some more controversial views that, low to moderate level of alcohol consumption can help with cardiovascular disease and some other potential, health issues and or health problems. But overall, this has been studied quite a bit, and you can't really look at alcohol as a health food, the way you can look at broccoli or something like that. And although some studies have shown some positive benefits, in terms of health, not on the psychic side, some studies have said, well, really the overall safe level of consumption is zero, that, you're going to live longer and be healthier if you don't drink at all. That said, and it's really important to know, there's no safe level of flying on an airplane. There's no safe level of driving to the supermarket. All these things increase your risk of something bad happening to you. So the question is always, what's the balance? You weigh the positives and the negatives. And for each person, that's going to be somewhat different, depending on, the way they consume their own body and their own use of it. So I would say you have to try to drink moderately and try to enjoy the experience and try to see where it's adding value to your life. But knowing that, it's a toxic chemical. It gets converted to something called acetaldehyde, which is a carcinogen, which causes that flushing reaction in people that are prone to it, causes hangovers. And the more you consume, independent of accidents and things like that can happen, it will be a negative consequence for your health. So, you want to understand it and educate yourself and drink as smart as you can. But, I like drinking and I'm not going to give it up, even though I know potential health consequences of it. And that's the way most drinkers are as well.
Yeah. So I imagine there's probably kind of a tipping point. You mentioned this earlier, kind of this balance of, enjoying yourself versus kind of long-term damage. Is there any kind of way of kind of calibrating that, of like really seeing, where that balance is? Is it an individual basis, or is it more along the lines of, probably not more than one or two drinks a night? Do you have any recommendations in that regard?
Yeah. So in terms of how much to drink, it again depends on how fast you're drinking, what you're drinking, whether you're drinking with food or not, how big you are and how you metabolize alcohol. So all those can affect, the effect you'll get from some X number of drinks. So I would look at it as more as what's that peak blood alcohol level you're achieving when you're drinking. That to me is more the measure of when you weigh all those things together, where is it in your body? And for me, being between 0.03 and 0.05 is sort of my level where, I'm getting a lot of the benefits of alcohol I see, but it's not too deleterious to me. Mm-hmm. Once I get above that, then I start feeling, and I have a breathalyzer and I'm familiar with, how these levels affect me. And I recommend that to anyone that's a drinker, just to know what it feels like to be at 0.03 or 0.05 or higher. So if you can stay within those boundaries, I think you'll enjoy drinking more and it'll be less deleterious to any health problems. But you could achieve that by drinking one drink very quickly on an empty stomach, or 3 drinks more slowly with some food. So, in terms of how much you drink, it really depends on all those other factors.
So before we started this recording, you brought up a really interesting topic, and I'd love to kind of take a detour in our conversation real quick about the importance of eating while you're drinking. Would you mind talking a little bit about kind of the effects that food can have on your overall kind of blood alcohol level and consumption?
Absolutely. This is a really important topic that I think is often overlooked in the whole field. Basically, when you drink alcohol, it's absorbed in different places, in your system. So when you first drink it, it pretty much gets to your stomach first. And there, alcohol is absorbed slowly through your stomach wall. Another thing that happens in your stomach is there's an enzyme that lines your stomach lining that breaks down alcohol. So it's actually destroyed there. Mm-hmm. But whatever is not destroyed in your stomach or absorbed from your stomach goes to your small intestine. And your small intestine is like a sponge. It's designed to absorb stuff, and it absorbs alcohol super quickly. So one thing people realize is that when they drink on an empty stomach, the alcohol, it doesn't stay in your stomach very long. It almost gets immediately transferred to your small intestine. And that's how come when you drink on an empty stomach, you get this quick rush of alcohol and it rushes right into your system. Mm-hmm. But when you eat food has an action where it slows your stomach from emptying. So if you have food in your stomach before you start to drink or while you're drinking, the alcohol gets stuck in your stomach a lot longer, and some of it's broken down and it's absorbed more slowly. So that's how that food effect works. It basically slows your stomach from emptying, and all foods do that in the same way. That's the main effect from food and alcohol. And my research has shown that you get the most benefit if you eat a little food about 5 to 10 minutes right before you start to drink. That is where you get the most bang per calorie of food. Of course, you'll also get a benefit while you drink too, but a lot of people don't realize, even if you eat maybe 200 to 300 calories before you drink, you can have a huge impact. So that goes hand in hand with our product called SOBAR, which is this food specifically designed to slow your stomach emptying the most per calorie compared to a regular snack. So that's how it works. So if you eat this SOBAR or another food before you drink, you can have a big impact without eating too many calories. So we did a clinical trial where we tested this product alongside Chex Mix and some other food products as a comparison. And we gave people basically 2 cocktails in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So a pretty stiff amount of drinking very quickly. And if you had no food before that, we tested this on 20 adults. Your blood alcohol got up to, over about 0.07 on average. Mm-hmm. If you had a full meal beforehand, maybe 700 calories, it went down to 0.02. So it was a huge effect by eating food before those 2 cocktails. But if you had the SOBAR, it went down by about 50% to about 0.03 something. So even though it only had, 200 something calories, it had a huge effect on the blood alcohol concentration if you eat the food at the right time. So that's really important to know.
Got it. And one of the things I was mentioning beforehand is I can see the benefit of this from a bartending perspective as well. Typically when we work in the bar, we get on shift, we have a nice big meal, we kind of work our way all the way through the shift. And by the time we're done, we're starving, but we also want a drink. So typically we'll go to another bar, have a beer and a shot or something, or cocktail, and order food. And most of the time that beer and shot are probably gone by the time food arrives. So I could see like having the benefit of something to snack on, like SOBAR or something like that, will help to kind of like push all that alcohol back and not being absorbed so quickly in the system. Is that kind of the general sense of kind of what food is doing?
Yeah. So food does two things. It both slows the absorption and it reduces the total absorption because, as I mentioned, it gets broken down in the stomach and not absorbed. So
got it.
When we tested, food on people in the clinical trial, and this has been shown in other trials, the total amount of alcohol absorbed can be reduced by 50 or more percent by the effect of food because your body breaks it down before it's absorbed. So that's a big effect. And most people, when you eat anything, your stomach empties about 2 to 4 hours after you finish eating. So if you started your shift and you ate, but then it's more than 5 hours later, your stomach's empty again. And if you're going to drink, you'll want to eat some kind of snack before you start drinking again. Even like I mentioned, 200 or 300 calories will make a difference.
Perfect. Okay, great. And then, so when we're talking about dry January here, people are going to be taking, myself included, will probably be taking 30 days off from drinking. And for some, that's going to be a big commitment of time and energy and focus. Is there any advice you would give people kind of leading up into dry January to kind of prepare themselves mentally for all this and physically as well, I guess?
Yeah, so I would begin by, saying putting dry January in the context of other, New Year's resolutions, basically, going to the gym, losing weight, exercising more, and thinking about what are you trying to achieve over that next month? What's your goal? Why are you doing it to begin with? And for different people, it'll be different reasons. One will be, just being part of a social movement, a phenomena. And others will be they want to see how it feels to be off alcohol for 30 days. And for some people, it'll just be, can I do it? It's a challenge to challenge yourself. Or they may be trying to fix particular issues or problems. Maybe they're having problems sleeping or other things that are attributing to alcohol that they want to see if dry January can address. So I'd go into it just, thinking it through is like what you're really hoping to get out of it in the short term. And then also thinking down the road is, with all things that we do in January to try to improve ourselves, is it going to last? What's it going to be like in March and May? And, can I learn something or change my behavior in some way out of that January period that's going to be real positive going forward?
Got it. Okay, perfect. Excellent. And I think hopefully my game plan, and tell me if this is a good one or not, is to kind of basically replace cocktails and alcohol with something a little bit more healthy. So my plan is probably to replace alcohol and cocktails with going to the gym or taking a walk or doing something that's going to be basically the opposite effect, that alcohol would have from a physical standpoint. So try to become more physically active. Would that be a decent approach?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing that could, while you're doing it, sort of trying to get a feel for what's triggering you wanting a drink during the month. Is it social situation? Is it, stress or some anxiety? Like when you're really going through this, and that might help you down the road figuring out, how you could, use that experience to better, better yourself for the rest of the year. So let me back up. So dry January is a pretty new phenomena.
Yep.
It started in like 2012 in the UK as a really sort of a health promotion type event. And since then, it's been really catching on. There's, millions of people doing it now. But it hasn't been studied that much. But I did come across a bunch of research studies that were done in the UK. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all, by a Dr. at the University of Sussex, Dr. Richard de Visser. Okay. And basically he took like 3,000 people who signed up for a dry January. and then studied them. And they went through it. We figured out, how many people succeeded, how many people didn't. At the end of the month, ask them, and this is all self-reported with survey data. What did they notice? Did anything improve in various ways? And then he also looked at them 6 months out into August and said, how these people follow up? Did their behavior change in any way? And what happened? So it was really very interesting. And I could share some of the results that they got from that study.
Sure.
Which were quite surprising to me. I mean, I thought it might just be more of a fad. So one thing in the short term that they noticed was, 93% of people just felt this sense of achievement of doing it, which is something. A lot of people saved a lot of money. 90% of people save money. Cocktails are expensive, as everyone knows. A lot of people lost weight and slept better. Over 50%. Some people reported better skin. Some people, basically, there was a whole bunch of health benefits that people noticed over the course of just a few weeks of not drinking. And interestingly, about 2/3 of the people that attempted it, that made it all the way to that 6-month reporting period, actually did it. So, some people don't make it through the month. It's difficult for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And an interesting aspect of that was he looked at, is there any way to predict which people are going to be successful at abstaining for a month? And generally speaking, the more moderate drinkers who reported better control of their alcohol intake were a good predictor at how they would succeed in completing dry January versus those that fail. So that was quite interesting. But probably the most important part of the study that I think came out for looking at people at 6 months out. Mm-hmm. And what they found there was that for those that completed dry January, they led to a significant change in their behavior. They tended to drink less drinks on average per day. They had fewer drinking days. They reported greater ability to control their drinking in various situations. And even the people that failed in January to finish the whole month also had some improvements in those areas, not as much as those that completed the month, but those that even attempted it did better. So that to me was a really a good and some way surprising element of the thing, because usually any kind of New Year's resolution, at least for me, I usually just fail by March and there's really not much of a long-term change. But I think people that dedicated themselves to this seem to have a longer-term benefit. And I think that's a positive thing that's making me want to do it this year. I've never tried it before, but I'm leaning toward doing it myself.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings me, kind of headed me off on the topic of kind of what people can expect as a result of going through dry January. And it's really interesting and fascinating to me that the study that you showed or that you read about the long-term effects, because I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to try dry January, and some people are going to succeed, some people are going to fail, but it's really interesting how it changes that long-term outlook on drinking and kind of allows people to kind of reevaluate their relationship with alcohol. That's super cool.
Yeah, no, I think it really is. It's a pretty radical change for people. So I think it gives them time to think. As I mentioned, they may notice during the month, what's their triggers for making them want that drink particularly. And, if they can, and then I could see a lot of positive feelings out of it. It's like, I was stressed out for whatever reason, but I got through it without that drink or drinks. And I can see how they could bring that forward into the future.
Absolutely. So this kind of brings me on to the next topic here. And I think that's really interesting or really important to pay attention to the trigger, because once you identify the trigger, then you can modify behavior. But when it comes to dry January and people that are kind of going through it, do you have any tips or suggestions if somebody is kind of struggling getting through dry January?
Yeah, I think from what I've read, the people that struggle the most were the heavier drinkers to begin with. So, if the drinking is relieving stress or, it's the psychic benefits that they're primarily getting that they're having difficulty coping with, I think There's some people that look at it as not necessarily a dry January, but a drier January. So one other mechanism might just be, just moderating. If you're a heavier drinker, trying to cut down from 3 drinks a day to 1,
Right.
especially if they're having difficulty. I mean, you could start with 0 and see how you can do, but rather than giving that up completely and going back, maybe going to 1 drink a day or whatever it is that helps them get through it with some positive reinforcement, feeling that, I didn't make it all the way through with 0, but whatever triggers I was having, I could manage with a smaller number.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've talked to a handful of producers and cocktail enthusiasts about is the idea of, to your point, of kind of moderating the intake a little bit by splitting your base spirit, like let's say whiskey or gin, with half, gin or whiskey and then half of a non-alcoholic spirit. So you're already taking down the consumption level of alcohol in there, but you still have a really interesting drink. And I think this has a really good place in dry January, where maybe if somebody is struggling with this, then that could kind of give them that release or that kind of that cocktail that they're hoping for, but without all those maybe harmful effects or without the kind of the moral or making them feel bad about failing. This could be a nice way of kind of still having all those things and having a little bit more of a positive than, just giving up and, going 3 drinks again or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of a part of a general concept of more conscious drinking, just thinking more about what you're drinking, how you're drinking it, how much of the flavor part is the important part to you versus the alcohol part. And I think that would be a good month to explore the flavor end of it. What kind of, drinks can you make that can satisfy those needs without alcohol? And the beer industry is really latching onto the low non-alcoholic beer. And, that could be said too for the cocktails. It's a little bit more challenging, but some of the flavor profiles I think you could also introduce and make some really tasty drinks without the alcohol, or at least a lot lower alcohol.
Absolutely. And kind of on that point, when I was bartending many years ago, there wasn't a lot of options out there for non-alcoholic. It was kind of like looked down on, like, why is it so expensive? And there was a lot of just emotion around non-alcoholic ingredients. And I think that has changed substantially, especially during COVID, where people try to be a little bit healthier. They still want something interesting and they don't want a cocktail. I think the spirit-free movement, the non-alcoholic availability and options are a lot better. The quality is better. And I think the options are a lot more. So I think, access to them is definitely easier than it was before. That's for sure.
Yeah, certainly attitudes are changing quite a bit. I attended a Chicago Cubs game a while back, and I was amazed, but the only beer advertised during the entire game on the big screen was Budweiser Zero.
Oh, interesting.
Which shocked me that was, the main advertising during the game. So clearly there's a lot of people that's appealing to.
Perfect. So kind of to wrap this up, people are going to go through dry January, if they go join us or not, that's up to them. But if they wanted to get the most like health benefit from dry January, what would you recommend they do?
I would say, try to replace the alcohol with something healthier. So there's some kind of habit. Maybe it'll be some kind of mineral water spritz when you might be having your normal drink. I guess you could use a non-alcohol alternative, like a non-alcoholic beer, but I think to do more control over it, you might want to make your own concoction, but make it more of a ritual rather than just being passive at it, which might help you avoid, breaking free and going for a real drink during the month. Try to, be conscious of what might be triggering you to want to drink particularly bad, and thinking that through a little bit more before you break the habit. But I've never done it myself, so it's going to be hard for me to really predict the challenge that I'm going to have maybe going through there. But I think the first week might be the most difficult, but after that, I think people might have a lot more ease in getting through the month.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, those were all kind of the medical questions I had for you. Last couple of questions, and that is, I know you're a very busy person. What do you have anything that you're working on that you'd love to kind of chat with us about?
Yeah, so what I've been working on really is related to food and alcohol. So one thing that I think coming through Dry January is a good opportunity for people is to sort of educate themselves more about alcohol in general, its health effects, how, drinking what affects your blood alcohol levels, as well as how food can affect, your alcohol levels and your drinking experience. So, I've developed a product called SOBAR, which is a special food designed to help reduce alcohol absorption more than other foods per calorie. And that's the whole idea behind it. It came from, an unmet need. Basically, I went to a wedding, drank a little too much on an empty stomach, and started thinking about why isn't there a food designed for affecting alcohol absorption? I mean, this is the most commonly used drug in the world. Everyone knows food reduces alcohol absorption, but no one's ever really specifically made a product for that. There's a lot of stuff for hangovers, which is really a different approach, really with hydration and maybe trying to help metabolize alcohol more after the fact. But the most important part is really the absorption phases, and that's what's under your control. So SOBAR is really the product that I've been working on. Was released in May. It's now for sale on Amazon and on our website, getsobars.com. And we're trying to get it into stores over the next year. But it's something that I think people should really focus on is having food at the right time when they're drinking. And whether it's a SOBAR or something else, doesn't matter. It's just make sure you eat something, 5 to 10 minutes before you start to drink is ideal, or in the early phases of while you're drinking. Some people ask me, after you drink, whether eating food will help. And generally speaking, not so much. After the alcohol is already in your bloodstream, having food may increase alcohol metabolism a little bit, but not much. So most of the effect you're going to get is while you're drinking and eating before you drink.
Got it. So the recommendation is definitely eat a couple of minutes before you start drinking, and that will hopefully maybe not prevent hangovers, but it'll slow down the absorption of alcohol in your system. Yeah,
it'll slow and reduce the alcohol. And, if it ends up at a lower blood alcohol level, it'll probably help with hangovers. And the important part of SOBAR is to have it portable. It's a protein bar you can keep in your pocket. So you have it with you at the right time. So that's the important thing is you just go into situations where, you're going to be drinking, but you just don't know whether there's going to be food around or available. A few weeks ago, went to a great speakeasy in Chicago called the Velvet Hour. They make amazing cocktails there, but they had no food whatsoever at the time. Maybe that's changed. And, we brought some SOBARs along, and that really helped because otherwise I would have been in deep trouble.
Absolutely. Great. And then do you have a social media platform that you tend to gravitate towards?
Instagram and at GetSobars is the handle there.
Perfect. We'll definitely include all those links in the show notes. And I just have one last question for you, Doctor. And that is around the hangover. And this is completely off topic, so if you don't have an answer for it, I totally realize I'm kind of blindsiding you with this. But one of the favorite kind of remedies of choice for a lot of bartenders the day afterwards is Pedialyte. So we'll drink Pedialyte, the morning of or morning after, and that has become kind of this thing we all do when we overconsume. Is there any benefit there, or is that more of kind of a placebo effect, or more of a effect of ingesting liquids?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard and seen some reports that are good for electrolytes and liquids. You can't go wrong with that. in any respect. There are others that try to address, increasing alcohol metabolism, which are, probably not is proven out as much. I know in Japan and South Korea, there's a lot of remedies that use turmeric and other kinds of some herbal remedies, and a lot of people do swear by them. But generally speaking, the best solution to a hangover is just keeping your blood alcohol level a little lower than the night before. Unfortunately, the damage is sort of done too by the time the hangover occurs, and that's because of this acetaldehyde, which is thought to be a big culprit in causing hangovers, but also causes a lot of the other health effects. It's a pretty nasty chemical. So trying to limit the amount of that in your blood through lower alcohol consumption or managing it better is probably the key.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much again for your time. And like I mentioned, we'll have links in the show note to SOBAR and your Instagram as well. Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right. Thank you.
So thanks again to Dr. Joseph Fisher for joining us on this podcast during Dry January. I know I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to trying his SOBAR as well. So we'll have links to his product over at abarabove.com, as well as everything else we talked about in this podcast. So head on over there, and you'll also find some great bar tools. So even during Dry January, you're probably going to need some good bar tools to make some fun creations. Head on over to abarabove.com and take a look at our line of premium bar tools. I promise you will not be disappointed. So have a great Dry January, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.